Sir, the truth is, I talk to God all the time. And no offense, but he's never mentioned you. How's it going, Mike?
Pretty good, pretty good. How about you? How about you?
Not too bad. I wasn't trying to insult you there, but I was giving a little quote like I normally do for a movie we've watched and are going to discuss. We're going to talk about LadyHawke,
Yep.
a cult classic from the '80s. I don't know. A lot of movies from the '80s have kind of a cult following. I don't know how much of a following LadyHawke has. It may just be myself and my younger sister, but we were obsessed with this movie back in the day. So it was sort of I wanted to give a little love letter to the movie and do a little podcast since we still do this thing and I'm able to do it. But yeah, it's a movie about a couple of cursed lovers that are destined to always be together but always be apart, and a thief that unwittingly ends up helping them out. Um, what's how are things, Mike? And yeah,
Good, good. Yeah, I just wanted to before we hop into it, I did want to say, yeah, that I had not seen this really before this movie until you suggested it, and so it definitely is of its time and era. I would
yeah,
for sure, and I can't wait to get into this and wanted to do that, but. Before we jump in too quick, I wanted to cover our just do a plug. So we're picking up subscribers here on a pretty normal at a good clip, it seems, and we just want to say thank you so
yep,
much if you subscribed. We really do appreciate it. Even more if you have commentary or if you even if there's something you like or don't like, that's all fine. We'd love to hear from all kinds. But now we're at 52 subscribers, and and like you were saying, you kind of made a little bit of a Reddit joke offline. But our latest show, Midsummer, we covered that, and
yeah,
we appreciate your watching us. So thank you very
yeah,
much for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff.
sure.
And we're on Twitter as well. If you're there, we're also have a website, but I need to update that very badly.
Yep,
But
yeah.
in any case, yeah. So you picked this one, and this one was one that you enjoyed growing up, I assume then, or
Right,
you
yeah.
shared.
It's yeah, it's been with me for forever. Yeah, watching it again this time on a Blu-ray. I was shocked by the Chris image and the letterbox. I forever didn't see it in the theater.
Mm.
I saw it on videotape. So you had the low quality videotape, and if you remember the square TVs, we didn't have letterbox TVs back in the day. So
No,
I'd
only in the
seen
theater.
this movie. Yeah, I've seen this movie several times on videotape, and and in the seeing it on the wide screen, aspect ratio. This time, I was just kind of reveling in all the extra space I could see around the. It gave it a more epic feel than I was used to. But yeah, it's been with me for forever. It came out in 1985, directed by Richard Donner,
Yes.
and I guess I'd seen previews about it. We my family didn't go to the movies a lot, so a lot of times we waited until things were on on regular TV or cable TV to see it.
Hmm.
So as a kid, most of my movies were were edited down, especially if they're R rated. They edited out all the bad stuff, and so yeah. But Lady Hawk was a PG movie, so there wasn't much editing to do on it. But yeah, so the first thing I really wanted to see this movie because I was big into fantasy, love fantasy, and they back in the day they would do novelizations of almost every movie that came out,
Right.
and that was I guess they sold a lot of books back pre-videotape. That was the only way to maybe relive a movie outside going to the theater to see it. So novelizations was a big deal back in the day. So I got the novelization of the book, read that, and and then I had fantasies of what the movie was like, and so when it finally came out on TV, I recorded it on my VCR so I could watch it over and over again. But yeah, it's one of those movies that was lived large in my mind for a long time. Now, we'll get into its faults. There is definitely faults to it.
There
It's not a
is.
not a perfect movie,
No, no.
but it has a certain charm to it that kind of uplifts and kind of overcomes a lot of its faults.
Yeah, it doesn't have much adversity. I'll give it that. And didn't really do that well at the box office.
No, it
Um,
didn't.
and this is, and we'll definitely get into that for sure. But for the most part, and there was a couple. I do have some criticisms this week as well on this one, and I don't have too many, but some are glaringly obvious, and it's kind of like why you figure out why this one kind of didn't catch on, and we'll definitely go into that for sure. But for some of its warts or flaws, whatever you want to call it, it definitely had a cool vibe to it, a good feel, and it still had better good parts than bad. It just kind of sucks how I guess they released it, or how the circumstances, whatever. There was a lot going on in the
Yeah,
80s, and this is another sword and sorcery one, just like Conan the Barbarian we covered a few months back actually. But in any case, this I definitely it's always fun to watch a Richard Donner film, a good one, and because like I guess we could start there. Like going back, this is definitely made in 1985.
oh yeah,
Like,
definitely.
I mean, you couldn't pick a more central, middle point of the road part of that era to pick than that for sure.
Yeah, it's
And
got a classic 1980s soundtrack. Instead of going for a big, uh, you know, big orchestra,
that's a good.
making it
It's funny
sound
you
like an
say that.
epic thing.
It
I read.
sees and looks like it is
Uh,
you cannot escape the it sounds like it part, unfortunately, as
it,
we'll get into here. But you're right,
well,
yeah, it's very
and
bizarre.
yeah, and the thing is, going back to Richard Donner, which we'll go into deeper on. He was actually when he was scouting locations, and I read this on the IMDb
Mm,
because there's not a lot of extra material. I usually like to dive into the extra material and give you little fun facts, but there's not a whole lot with this
right,
movie. There's no commentary on Blu-ray, no extras, so um, you won't get a whole lot. But yeah, Richard Donner was listening to Alan Parsons Project
yes,
album while scouting locations, and that kind of got stuck in his head, and that was the sound that he kind of wanted. So he got Andrew Powell, who works with Alan Parsons Project. I don't know if he's a member, but yeah, he's worked on several of their albums, and he did the soundtrack, and he worked in the kind of synth prog rock that Alan Parsons does. Back
right.
in the day, me and my younger sister were huge Alan Parsons Project fans. We had one song that we played over and over obsessively. So we loved the soundtrack. I know a lot of
Matthew
people
Broderick,
have issues with the soundtrack,
a
but
pickpocket who thought
we
that
loved it.
anything was
She actually
better
owned a
than prison.
copy
Little
of the
did he know
soundtrack, and
what he'd escaped from
it was
wasn't half
we.
as
I
strange
even
or
forgot that she
frightening
had got the
as what he'd
soundtrack, but
stumbled
there was
into.
a line in it when Matthew Broderick and Rutger Hauer, those characters are talking, and he's Matthew's describing a what she said about Rutger, and he starts off saying she was sad at first, and that's one of the tracks, the names of one of the
The
tracks on the
pickpocket was the
soundtrack, and I
key.
immediately
He was the first
remembered it
man
as a track, and that
to
was
act
I think
like
my
a hero.
sister's favorite
It just
track on
wasn't
the
easy.
soundtrack. So yeah, it was so yeah. There's a lot of memories that came back while watching it, but yeah. So getting back to Richard Donner, what was you were saying?
Yeah, no, just the
Just like that.
80s, and I just what of course, any good nerd, whether you're an action film nerd or you're a comedy fan nerd, well, action comedy, kind of that sort of thing, um, like where there's some kind of humor interweaved, or you're just he covered so many great movies, or was the a creator for them in the 80s. that lives on to this day. And yeah, what Richard Donner,
Yeah.
like the cool thing was that specifically to kind of give you the you look at the map on the wall and say you are here. You're basically at where Lady Hawk was released in '85, and then that was in the spring. And then the Goonies, which was like blow up. If there's a small cultish following behind Lady Hawk, there is like that is the Goonies, but with everybody.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah, and
has
that
its own
was
gravitas and gravity.
yeah,
And
and
then
that one wasn't directed by Richard Donner. That was Chris Columbus.
oh,
Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah,
right,
yeah,
right, right.
I
Yep,
believe so.
you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
But yeah, Goonie. Yeah, the whole '80s are filled with iconic movies and properties that Hollywood digs back even today to I'm surprised there's not a Goonies sequel in the works right now. They're just kind of digging back for all the gold that they can. I don't believe they'll do that with Lady Hawk. Again, it doesn't even really have a cult following. But yeah, Richard Donner's done quite a few movies. I know he's most known for Lethal Weapon
Yeah,
movies.
which came a
Looks like
little bit
yeah,
later.
but yeah, there's Superman and Superman 2.
Uh,
There's Superman 2. There's the big Donner cut of that movie that was big a few years ago because he
right.
they famously the studio took it away from him to make
They did.
their own cut of Superman 2. Not all directors have final cut. That's something they have to put in the contract, and
Right.
sometimes studio if there's not a final cut that the director has, they will take it away, and if they're not happy with the director's cut, and make their own cut.
Yeah, yeah, he just he went on to do and was very beloved obviously by the time we get up to like the even closer to modern day because I believe he did pass away in 2021 pretty
Yes.
recently which sucks.
Yeah.
And actually let me oh, excuse me. Let me be respectful here and get his yeah, when he passed away. Okay, it was the summer. That's so funny. Summer a couple years ago, which sucks,
Oh yeah. About time. Yeah.
yeah, Superman and then I think they did the Donner cut later, much later on in our era, closer to our era than back then,
Yeah.
2006. They did the release the extended cut like where it got took his thing on the cutting room floor and then put it made it into a movie, which is
Right.
famous. But Superman and then the other thing too, that he did a lot for research for this. When I read that he was a famous TV director for a couple decades before he did movies. And he did some very iconic ones, like he did Twilight Zone. I immediately gravitated toward that, and I think he directed like 6 or 7 episodes of the Twilight Zone. Anyway, I ended up watching like one of them that was just interesting, and then I invariably will rewatch the famous William Shatner one, like with or Terror at 20,000 feet or something like that, something along those lines. But something with 20,000 feet in the title. But he directed that.
Oh, and my
That
mistake. I have to apologize. He did direct Goonies. I don't know why I was thinking Christopher Columbus. But yeah, no, he. Oh, maybe Christopher Columbus wrote it.
I know. Yeah, Christopher. Yeah, he wrote it with Steven Spielberg, I think,
Okay.
like famously. But yeah, but anyway, the point is like he is the quintessential '80s great movie guy is the
Yeah.
point. Um, but
Absolutely.
and the other thing that I thought was cool, like because I'm closer to this age than not, which was he didn't start directing movies. So he had a pretty successful TV, like on the small screen career up
Mhm.
to that point, and then he by the time Superman came around, he started directing pretty late at 46 or something like that. That's what my
Right.
that might be wrong on that, but in any case, that's the point. That I just thought, but you can definitely this feels and looks like a Richard Donner film is what my point is for all that
Right.
spiel and build up. But he was
Yeah.
just it's just great
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Very, very poppy. Very accessible. This movie it doesn't. It doesn't ask too much from the audience. It says, "Hey, come on in. I'm going to tell you a story," and that's the sort
Right.
of way Richard Donner's stuff is. It's very, very inviting, very appealing to a lot of people. It's got that element, like you said, of Richard Donner. He does it. He's not. He kind of lets the movie tell the story. Although I will point out a couple of interesting flares that he did with his directing, but yeah, it's not too flashy. It's not a David Lynch film that you're gonna have to really kind of dig into. But yeah, Richard Donner knew how to make genre movies in very different genres. He did Lethal Weapon,
Right.
Superman, Goonies. All of them did them quite well. He was kind of tapped into that that the nerdom that we've come to know. He knew what the nerds wanted.
Right. Right. He knew how to make it work.
Mhm.
And the though he, like you were saying, to kind of go into that, he was like he was very talented across genres. Uh,
Yeah, he even did The Omen, a classic horror movie.
it's true, very true. Yeah, he wasn't afraid to do different things and speak in different languages, so to speak, across art that is film, to be
Right.
fancy about it. But I mean, Lethal Weapon. Oh man, I mean, that's just uh, it's just great.
Classic stuff. Yeah.
I thought there was another one, but I just can't. No, I don't see it. Oh well. But anyway,
Yes.
the cool part was like I kind of got sucked into the Richard Donner vortex here, and I went back and I was watching Twilight Zone. I always love to get an opportunity when I can go back and watch those. Those are always fun. And I also watched a couple other ones that he did from that thing, and I'll put them in the show notes. But one was that classic one that I said. But then there's the KGB one that it was just a good thing. But he has a way of making you feel like you're part of that world, and that world is accessible too. No matter what any of these movies, because you felt like in Lethal Weapon you were there with them.
Yeah.
You know, same for Superman and the Goonies, obviously, and this is no different. It's just kind of sad that the uh, the feeling of 80s from the soundtrack, um, probably not a great choice, but that's like one of the first criticisms that I would lay out. But
Yeah,
but
and you see it as a criticism. I see it as a positive. Like that's I guess that's one of the choices that makes it a little bit different. A lot of genre movies that would normally have done like big orchestras. They were kind of experimenting
right,
with the prog rock, the electronic music that was big in the day during that time, and maybe they didn't age well, and obviously you feel like it didn't age very well, but
it I.
uh,
I would say this. This is like if you see it for the very first time in your life,
yeah,
I would say that plays into that. But I would definitely
uh-huh,
say like I could easily see where the quirkiness of this movie would grow on you very easily. So like the next
right,
time you see it, you're already in that mindset, and it doesn't kind of displace you as well, if you're expecting it, I guess.
right, right,
But like, well, who am I to be a critic about it? But it was just like something like, okay, that's cool, and
yeah,
then you kind of roll with it, and then you roll into this. And the funny part is like the timing didn't quite work that well for certain parts of this as far as it release was, and the chronology of his films. But nonetheless, he draws you into this story and he makes you believe. And also, that's another thing I wanted to say was the acting was pretty good,
yep.
than
And then
than
talk
you would
about the
expect
cast.
to. Yeah,
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 you got some titans in there. You got Rutger Hauer, you got Matthew Broderick and Michelle Pfeiffer, big names for the '80s.
right.
But the it it came out a year before Ferris Bueller, so Matthew Broderick wasn't a big deal at that point.
Okay, okay,
Rutger
interesting.
Hauer was more of a heavy at that time. He was the bad guy and things. So, and then I don't know if Michelle Pfeiffer. I think she had done Scarface, but she
That's what I.
hadn't probably hadn't quite blown up quite yet, and so it didn't have like a big lead in it. And the thing is, like, they had Kurt Russell in the role that Rutger Hauer is going to play, and
I read that. Yeah.
yeah, right before principal photography, the he dropped out, and Rutger Howard had auditioned for the lead role, and Richard Donner liked him, didn't like him for the lead, but wanted him to be the the bad guy. I forget the name of the guy. I think Marquette. The current
Okay.
head of the guard, the bad guy, basically,
Right.
the heavy, and so he
Big
wanted him to
baggy.
play that role, Rutger, and Rutger wasn't interested in that. He didn't want to play the bad guy in this one. So he wasn't going to do it. And then when Kurt Russell dropped out, they brought in Rutger Howard. And unfortunately, I don't. At that time, Kurt Russell's big name. It would have been a different movie because Kurt Russell would have brought his natural charisma to it. Character of Navarro would probably be more inviting. I like that he's more detached and stoic in this movie, but I don't
Mm.
know if it didn't give a broad appeal to an audience. I think he's kind of hard to warm up to, and
E-
that may be one of the faults of why it didn't do as well. Again,
yeah.
there wasn't star power to it, so it had to rely on its story and the acting and everything, and maybe that's one of the things that just didn't land with the audience.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't speak to the original audience, obviously, but I definitely can speak to his role and getting you. He does have a stoic kind of way about him throughout
Hmm.
this. He has a certain air of confidence,
Yeah,
and I don't see that I could see that in a Russell Crowe, just quite like that. How
you mean
that
Kurt
would,
Russell?
yeah, Kurt Russell, right? If Kurt Russell
Yeah.
had been that, I don't know that I would have. I don't know that that would have worked as well, I guess, for believability
Right.
as far as that. Like there's Matthew Broderick, and Matthew Broderick, he does a he does a good job. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but he when you see Matthew Broderick, of course, I'm coming with the body of experience of like Ferris
Hmm.
Bueller and
Hmm.
a million other Broderick roles, that are like quintessentially him, or that focused on his quirks. That was another
Right.
kind of quirk of this movie that I would say, in a positive way. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't, despite the fact that it's Matthew Broderick, I don't know that you would put another person in this one, for this role. I have no idea the history, but
They
that would be interesting
yeah
to hear or see.
they had other people they were considering were Sean Penn and
Okay.
Dustin Hoffman, which would have been either one of them would have made it completely different unto
Right.
itself.
Right.
But yeah, Matthew Broderick. Since they cast Rutger Howard as Navarro, you needed that kind of boisterous, charismatic person to kind of play off of him, and Matthew Broderick brought that with spades. No, I read a couple of reviews, negative reviews about Lady Hawk online, and one of the thing that I think they both said that they didn't care for Matthew Broderick's acting, which maybe I'm just partial. Maybe it's the young teenage version of me that just loved it, and loved
Right.
Matthew Broderick because I saw it even though it came out before Ferris Bueller. I saw Ferris Bueller in the theaters. I think everybody did back in the day, but and you had to stay for the credits. That was
Right.
the very first movie that had the whole uh, you know uh, thing at the end that Marvel plays on to get you to sit through the whole dang
Oh,
movie
right. Right.
nowadays. But yeah, so everybody was charmed by Matthew Broderick. So by the time it came out on cable, when I saw it, I was a big Matthew Broderick fan, and
Right.
I think probably a lot of people watched it on cable because they advertised it big since Matthew Broderick was such a huge star at that point after Ferris Bueller. But yeah, he kind of brings that same kind of charisma that he had in Ferris Bueller. He's a secondary character. Navarro's like well, I don't know. They kind of share the lead. Matthew's probably more of a lead, even though he's sort
Mouse.
of
Yeah.
the observer. He's sort of he's us. If any of the audience is going to identify or see the movie through a character's eyes, it's going to be Matthew, and he has kind of you could say that his acting's more modern than what is being acted by everybody else in the film. Everybody else seems kind of the period,
Right.
whereas Matthew is more of a feisty teenager, modern 80s teenager, going through things, which I find completely charming. Maybe it breaks the immersion for some people, but I
Right.
just love it. Just he has some really smart and funny lines in the movie. His constant talking to God uh, always gets me every time. I love all those lines. In the opening, I say the opening 15 minutes, you could probably find some bloat and some things that you could trim down or rework in the middle, but that opening is perfect. I think that whole thing when he's trying to escape from the prison, all of that is riveting and fascinating. And you see Rutger Hauer's character watching the castle kind of shadowed. You're kind of
Right.
trying to figure out what's going on with this guy, and are right there with Matthew trying to escape the prison. And it's a bit harrowing, and it's really paced quite well. I really love the opening to this movie, and I think that kind of hooks you in, and it kind of falters again. We could get into it a little bit more um, towards the middle, but the beginning of it was pretty masterful.
Yeah, the only thing Matthew Broderick, exactly, that you described it perfectly. You put words on how I felt his. It doesn't take you out of it. I'm not going to go that far to say that his acting takes you out of the movie at all because it's expected because it's Matthew Broderick. But at the same
Right,
time, there is a certain quirkiness with it, and you could kind of see like where I could see like where it maybe it leaves it a little bit soft in some things, but for the most part, though, I don't know. It's kind of goes without saying, like like it still holds up. I think, and is it like, as good as Conan or something like that, or something another sword and sorcery one? Not really, but it's kind of got its own
right.
kind of. It's kind of got its own. It kind of goes at its
It's
own speed, really. I mean,
Yeah, it's charming. It's a
right.
charming little movie, and
Quirky,
for
charming. I
me,
would say, yeah, yeah.
I think its major issue, and I was trying to think of how to rework it if I was going to take a stab at reworking the script, but uh, the way they pace it out, you'd have to do some major reworking. But the major issue is there's not a there's a couple of actually three different bad guys, but they're barely in the movie.
Mm.
There's not a constant threat in the movie. There's not
It's.
an overwhelming threat, so it seems kind of aimless at
Mm,
times towards
I
the
can see
middle.
that.
It's definitely telling the story, and you have to get the story out. The You have to explain the curse. They kind of leave the curse kind of a mystery, and we'll um, probably won't get too much in detail because I think a lot of people, if they watch this, may have not have seen the movie and are just kind of curious and watch it because it's us. So we won't get too much into spoilers, so that you can enjoy the movie for what it is. But yeah, they kind of leave a mystery for a good portion of the movie as far as what's going on, and you can probably figure it out as it goes. But yeah, the details of the curse, and Matthew again, like the audience is trying to figure out exactly what's going on. So I like that aspect of it, but at one point you have to have an information dump about halfway through, and they picked a wonderful character actor. I forget his name. As a priest, actually explains everything. It does it in a wonderfully charming way. He's sitting with Matthew at a little fire, and I love
Mhm.
it brought back memories of he just at different points in his story he throws a little chunk of wood into the fire, and he explodes, and that kind of punctuates the story every once in a while. And I remember that vividly from previous watchings. But yeah, he's such a character actor that in such an interesting character that 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 center part is kind of enlivened with that particular character, and him and Matthew becomes kind of like a buddy movie at that point between the old priest and Matthew.
That
And
yeah,
I
that
would even
yeah.
I would have watched a sequel of those two guys, you know. But yeah, so you have a lot of really good elements to this movie. I just don't know if it got pieced together in the perfect way.
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer also. We didn't really talk too much about her,
Right.
but her there's nobody that could have done that any better than her, point blank. And of course,
Yeah.
she's great. And like you said, she was coming off of Scarface and going. Unfortunately, this was kind of a downer for all involved, but not really. It didn't take long before them to pop back up.
Bounce
So,
back up. Yeah.
yep. And then they kind of they went on about the oh, come on, good grief. Yeah, I don't think it's as well. I don't know. That might be arguable. I was just looking at the rating, but anyway, we're not going
Yeah.
to get into that one. But I think this one is kind of exempt a little bit from rating, to be honest with you, because it's so old it's a classic in its own right for its quirkiness, regardless.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think if it came out today, it might have rated a bit lower. I think they might have rated it the 7 for nostalgia reasons. I don't know. But yeah, there's some cool moments in it. There's a scene where Michelle Pfeiffer's character gets struck by an arrow, and the bishop is the one. The evil bishop put the curse on both Navarro and Isabeau, Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer. The bishop is the evil one that you know he wanted the Michelle Pfeiffer character. If he couldn't have her, no one could, and he cursed the two lovers. When she gets struck by an arrow, the bishop's in his bed and he's having a nightmare, and I don't know if he's tied to her. I don't know. I couldn't get a sense of what that relationship was, or how that was tied together. If he was just having a nightmare, but he's woken in the dead of night by a messenger, and he's in his curtained bed, and the curtain gets pulled, and the messenger has a cross, and there's a interesting play of shadows where the
mm,
bishop is on his bed, kind of up on all fours, and the shadow of the cross kind of plays across him, and it's a really interesting play of light, which is very reminiscent of the scene in Nosferatu. I don't know if you
mm,
remember that silent movie from the 20s, that German expressionist movie that was about Dracula. There's a scene in that where Dracula is coming up on a woman, and he's in shadow, and you see her and his hands as claws, kind of shadow,
mm.
kind of creeps up on her. That's sort of kind of those two scenes are very reminiscent. I'm sure he was kind of playing with that, and I like the little plays. There's maybe one or two other scenes like that where he's kind of calling back to certain things, and that scene right there with the sword, that's kind of iconic.
Oh
and
yeah.
But yeah, he's I think in one of the scenes, Rucker throws the sword without looking, and hits it, and he said that was the most impressive thing that he's done in the in the thing. But yeah, I don't think it was this, since Matthew was right there.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know quite how they did that,
Yeah.
and also the go ahead.
I was going to say a bright spot for this movie is the action sequences. Like when there's a fighting, it holds up it looks really good,
Yeah,
to be honest.
right.
You're still enjoyable. I mean, there's not too many of them, but
Yeah,
for the ones that it has, it serves them up very well. I'll say that for sure.
yeah, and the scenes, they don't spend a lot of time at the castle. Basically, at the
Right.
beginning of the movie and the end, but seeing that, I don't know how much. I think maybe the chapel stuff was. I don't know if that was in a real chapel or not, but all of that stuff is impressive, and seeing it on the widescreen again, a novelty for this movie and me. Seeing all that castle stuff and the horses riding through the gates of the castle and all of that look wonderful. Really nice. You get that authentic feeling with the castle, and it's a nice blend. If they did do some sets, or if it's all on location, I couldn't tell, and that's a good thing. The one thing I will point out, they obviously it's the 80s special effects. We didn't
Right.
have CGI back then, so they had to play with trickery, maybe blue screen and all the stuff that doesn't look good. And it's cheap looking now, but was state of the art back then. I think they did the transformations really well with Rutger in his transformations. Since it's a wolf, you get they could play with the eyes and various things.
Yeah,
Those transitions worked really well. The Hawk and Michelle Pfeiffer, not so much.
yeah,
That
very
took it.
much, yeah, very much 80s, is what I would say, and that's,
Yeah,
that it's not being negative. That's just
right.
kind of like, what you would expect to get around that time. But yeah, I agree with you. Like some of them hold up. They're better than, well, okay, they're not all great, but
Yeah,
they're on a scale there. I think is what we're
I,
saying
I think I think
for itself.
what helps the movie is they don't linger on it.
No,
It's quick cuts. So
done done.
so
Move on.
they probably back then you could say that, well, back then we just didn't know better, but we knew when it didn't look right. I mean, if it looked a little off, we knew it looked off. But that's all we had, so we went with it. But yeah, they didn't linger on that stuff, so it's kind of quick cuts. So it doesn't mar it that much. It doesn't age it too much. Yeah, and then that's another thing. I don't think the movie aged that badly. Again, it's a lot of it's there's not anything outside the soundtrack. It's I guess the soundtrack didn't age well, but everything else I think aged pretty well. There's the one other thing that I'll criticize it about is towards the end there's a subplot about hiding um, Navarro's Rutger Hauer's character's his big sword. They
Mm.
hide it for a reason, and I don't think that plays out very well. The reasoning and how it there's this a scene later where the swords return to him, and
Mm.
it's almost like an afterthought. I don't know if maybe that got lost in editing and there's a bigger maybe plot point about that. But yeah,
Yeah,
as is, it just didn't quite work.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I just don't. I don't. It wasn't that big of a. Was made to be big, but it wasn't
Yeah,
delivered. That kind of thing. Yeah, I could see
right.
that. Yeah, and I think I did do a um, little searching in the background, and it says that it was made in Italy, or primarily
Okay.
filmed in Italy, which makes I totally accept that without reservation, and that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. But in any case, another part of this where the music is memorable for maybe nostalgia reasons or otherwise, they come up, the visual aspects of this. Again, this goes to the talent that Richard Donner has with how he uses his mind's eye, and he gets you to see what he's looking for. And that's true throughout this as well. Very very iconic kind of scenes that I would only ever associate with this movie, and as a sword and sorcery, sword work kind of thing. Not a lot of
Yeah,
sword play, but there is it's enough and it's valuable. And other than that, then you are carried by these characters, and you do get to care about what them. And I wanted to kind of circle back around and talk about Leo McKern real quick. He was
okay,
the
yep,
yeah the monk, or monk dude. What
yeah,
was he? Yeah, or Imperus was his character name, whatever. But he played like a monk dude, like a
yeah,
kind of like a thing. But you accept him, and he is kind of like, it sets up a good buddy buddy kind of thing with him and Gaston. Matthew Broderick's character, uh,
Right.
the mouse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
but
again, I could see a whole movie with those two characters.
absolutely, yeah. That's why I wanted to kind of go back and visit that and support that. I would that would be cool, or kind of like a cool. I could have seen this be like or them be like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of
Yeah.
spin off in its own right
Right.
or something like who knows what kind of crazy stuff that they would have done in the 80s. But anyway, I just wanted to call out his good
Yeah.
acting. He was fun. I really enjoyed his character and his acting
Yeah.
in the film, even though it wasn't all that much, but it was enough to make an impression for me. But
Yeah.
just wanted to touch on
Yeah.
that.
And one other thing I like, there's a scene early
There he
on
is.
when Matthew Broderick escapes the castle, and he goes to an inn, and he's boasting that he's escaped the castle, and
Mm,
unbeknownst to him, there's a couple of guards there, Imperial guards with hoods on that aren't recognizable, and they go, well, hey, and reveal that they're guards, and there's an extended scene where he's kind of eluding them. He's kind of ducking under tables, climbing up, and slipping out of their grasp. And I would have loved to seen a lot more of that in the movie.
mm,
It gave me really big Jackie Chan vibes without the actual
mm.
fighting.
Interesting.
That's I was like, man, I could see Jackie Chan doing this stuff. And the one of the things about the character Gaston that Matthew Broderick plays, it's emphasized at the beginning that he's really, and his nickname is the Mouse in the
Right.
movie. And the thing is, he could slip out. He was able to escape the castle because he could kind of squeeze through these impossible little holes and crevices that no other man could kind of squeeze out of. And at the time, Matthew Broderick was such a little guy that you could actually, that's conceivable. And in with the action scene when he's kind of getting out and getting loose from all
Right.
the bad guys, it really plays into the fact that he's a thief and he's light on his feet and he's quick. And I wish they could have worked that into more scenes and later through the movie, because that kind of showed you uh, what assets he had that um, makes him valuable as a companion, as a character. But that doesn't really pay off throughout the movie.
Mm,
That's kind of lost early on, and again,
interesting.
that's another kind of fault I kind of have with the movie. Again, I have a lot of a lot of criticisms about the movie, but it's near and dear to my heart. It's one of those movies that I'll go back to. I just love it, and but anyone that comes at me with criticisms about it, I'm going to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to agree with most of them.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah.
it's lovable despite its negative aspects.
Yeah, it works. It works. It has more that works that doesn't. It's just kind of a shame that it didn't quite make the impact that everybody was looking for it
Yeah,
to make,
yeah,
or at least the studio anyway. But
right.
and
And
I did some research. I did read that some of the background was that maybe if they would have done, instead of doing a wide every theater release nation, like if they would have done like maybe a smaller little few theaters and like kind of let word of mouth grow, then
yeah,
then
build it
maybe
up.
released
Yeah,
it wider, then maybe it would have fared a little bit better. But I mean, this is speculation at this point, and speculation is pure fiction anyway, so maybe
right.
that's
Yeah,
true, maybe not. But it did come up through kind of doing a little bit more research on Richard Donner. There is a book that I want to check out. I think by James Christian, was a authorized autobiography of Richard Donner.
okay.
That I think that he. But anyway, I stumbled over that, and I
Yeah,
added that to my reading list essentially.
yeah,
But because you kind of just want to figure it out. Or excuse me, the title is "You're a Director You Figured Out" of Richard Donner, whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to, and I'll put that in the show notes too,
yeah,
if I
yeah,
remember. But in any case, I want to read that book, and
yeah,
because I'm fascinated. And you
yeah.
get closer to who and how his vision was. the Alan Parsons Project wasn't really my thing back in the day. Of course, I was a little one. I was a wee one when this came out anyway, and I wouldn't have seen it until like at earliest probably would have been 89 or 90 for me
Right.
personally, but I never did. So
Yeah.
not until 2023. So, but all the same, I'm happy I saw it. I'm happy I got
Yeah.
to
Yeah. And
have that kind of. Now I'm gonna have my own. This is the thing with movies. You develop your own your own memories and experiences with them, and in your own right. But
yeah.
just wanted to say that.
Yeah. And someone else. Yeah. And then someone else was saying. I was watching, and they said, your attitude or your feelings while you watch a movie, if you had a bad day or whatever, also kind of has influence as far as how you view a movie. And some movies can take you away from those bad feelings.
Right.
If things aren't going well for you, watching a good movie that brings back good memories also helps as well.
Indeed,
Um,
indeed. Just
yeah,
for a little bit.
and
I know
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there's those kind of things that you can have that you can reach for are wonderful. Like when you're just not having a great day or week or whatever month or even a year.
yeah,
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 it's like a stupid Friends theme song there in my head,
right, yeah.
stuck in my head. But
we
yeah,
just we just need the couch. But yeah,
right.
we talked about a lot of
Cafe
negative
Perk
things,
or
but
whatever.
some of the positive thing is the love story works. The fact that Rutger Hauer's this stoic character, when he does show emotion, when he does show the love that he feels for the Michelle Pfeiffer character, I think it impacts you even more. In when he's pretty rough with Gaston, Matthew Broderick's character, early on. There's kind of an antagonistic relationship between the two,
Mm,
but as that friendship kind of grows um, and becomes a genuine friendship, that's played very well and has a very good payoff as well. I think the relationships in the movie, since that's what they focused on in this movie, are the what really works for this movie.
yeah, yeah, despite all the various conversations that we've had on its parts, individual pieces, together though, they're coherent and there's a certain energy between all the characters that works.
Right.
In my opinion, in one of those that we touched on earlier, which was the kid and the monk, Leo McKern and Matthew Broderick, very much. But also between Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Well,
But yeah, it's probably a lesser tier fantasy movie from the 80s. There's some other bigger ones, like you said, Conan the Barbarian. But back in the day, that was one of the charms of the 80s, and
right.
one of the reasons why people go back to it, because it was um, Star Wars had just came out, and they were trying to capture that lightning in a bottle again. So they were trying a lot of interesting new things, trying to find the next thing that would catch fire. And so there was a lot of creativity, a lot of interesting, weird ideas that got greenlit. So there's a lot of quirky, interesting movies from the 80s that probably wouldn't have happened if Star Wars hadn't happened and kind of caused this nerd craze that kind of set the world on fire. And yeah, no, I think LadyHawke is just one of those ideas and movies that got out there and thrown out there. I don't know if something like this would get made today because it's not a franchise movie. It's just not. It's just kind of a nice, charming little
Right.
romance story. And then also in some of the reviews I was reading, people were like, "Well, if you wanted a fantasy love story, watch Princess Bride instead," which is charming. But I think that one has a wholly different tone to it, totally different movie. I think it's blasphemous because
Mm.
everybody loves Princess Bride, but I never really cared for that movie. I loved LadyHawke. Maybe I'm more of a LadyHawke guy than a Princess Bride guy.
Yeah. Look. I'm not gonna sit here and be a hater or anything like that. But I look. I always enjoyed that movie. But like,
Yeah,
was it
it's
what
not a
was it
bad
some?
movie.
Yeah, no. Like, but was it like something that I recall like fondly in my childhood, like that I returned to over and over again? Not really. I mean, I don't get me wrong. Like, I've watched it, but I watched it far more as an adult than I did as a kid or teenager.
Right.
And I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm just saying, but
Yeah, and that
I
uh,
respect that it is a cultural touchstone for sure. But
mhm,
it's a completely different movie.
yeah.
That's a completely different movie, and that's not a sword and sorcery genre type. That's not
No,
that's barely fantasy, really.
yeah, it's more of a comedy.
Yeah, it definitely is a comedy for sure. It's more of like a I don't know, like a narration or like a play.
Yeah, it's
Kind of,
yeah, yeah,
but
fairy
fantasy.
tale. Yeah,
Yeah, fairy tale. Exactly. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Fairy tale. That it is the genre of a fairy tale.
yeah,
Like literally. I mean, I know it's in the thing, but anyway,
yeah.
not to beat a dead horse, but this is much more of a sword and sorcery kind of play than than other things. But I don't know that I would say that this would stack up on that door, so to speak, all that well on that, because I would think of other ones because like I mean, excuse me, Conan was more just as much action as it was, fantasy. You could argue,
Mhm.
action based because it was, Arnold, which has its own criticisms,
And
perhaps.
like
But
Mike said, we did cover Conan a few weeks back. So if you haven't seen that one, check that out as well. But I think we're probably getting towards the tail end of things, as you like to say. Um, and you brought up the Just Watch that we
yeah,
unfortunately this isn't streaming free on any of the services.
no,
You'll
had to rent it or find another way to get it. We'll
yeah
just put it that way.
yep.
Which
And there's a No Frills Blu-ray out there on Amazon from Warner Brothers Archives,
hmm,
which I have that copy of it. It would be wonderful, but I don't think there's a demand for it. But it'd be wonderful if they came out with a special edition Blu-ray or a 4K. But I'm not holding my breath for that. We're probably lucky to have the Blu-ray archive Blu-ray. Um,
what's the cost of it if you remember?
oh, I think it's under $10.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So
well, that's eminently
yeah.
reasonable then. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's a quick. Kind of sucks there's no frills or there's no commentary or whatever, but
yeah,
oh well.
yep.
Of course,
But yeah, uh,
who knows? That could be like a Richard Donner. Like, so I doubt that's out there somewhere, actually.
no. But yeah, or you can rent it, like I said. But yeah, it's I think it's depending on our if we kind of whet your appetite for it, give it a rent or pick up the Blu-ray, and if you watch it based on our recommendation, give us a comment down below and tell us what you thought of it, or if you've already seen it, give us your feelings on it. Again, we didn't sugarcoat it. We've give you the movie warts and all. So
Hmm.
if but yeah, with all the caveats that we said, if still sounds like a cool movie for you, give it a look. Again, it's near and dear to my heart.
Little
It's
did he
one of those
know,
movies
stumbled into
that I really wanted to talk about at one point on our podcast. I know it's not a
act
huge
like a
movie, so
hero.
we probably won't get a whole bunch of views on it. But we're not view hounds. We're not we don't like Mike said that's not what we're here for. We're for the love of the movies.
Yeah.
We're for the love of the nerdom. We want to share it with you. We want you to share it with us. So yeah, anytime you have a recommendation, throw it at us on our comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I know there's like I said, we're every week we're picking up one or two subscribers. I think it's sort of like for a while there we weren't getting anything, and I think it's sort of like the the beggar on the street with his instrument with his hat. If the hat's empty, you're less likely to throw something in. But once you start getting some change in there, the starts to flow. So I think we finally got some change in our hat, and I think we're finally getting some subscribers.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. We'd love to develop a community around this and around this
Absolutely.
and one more week every week or so that we do this. It's just another one on that library, and we build that up, and we're already up to 138. We will be 139 by the time we release this. And I definitely have developed a taste for new genres through our
Yep.
watching, and I love that. Again, I think you're a much better reviewer on these things than I am over the course of the thing, but definitely for recommendation. I mean, not that I can't articulate what I think or feel,
Oh
because I
yeah, yeah.
do.
You do you do well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But especially if something's egregious or something is really great or fascinating. But we continue to build that back catalog, and I'm really proud of that. And at some point, I've got to go back and like cross-reference it and do a friggin' database here on it because like we're getting up there in the numbers and
Right.
we're
Right.
going we're the time is stacked up. But in any case, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
and
watching.
we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, there's tons of stuff that, and we're into nerdy stuff from the past up until today. So,
Yeah,
yeah, everything's fair game
yeah, oh,
in our eyes.
yeah, absolutely. And if you wanted to hit us up on Twitter, with like maybe a hashtag of the first, the last, of the nerdum, or the initials there, TFTLTN. Maybe we'll see you there or talk to you in the comments section for sure. Always look forward to like when we get those. Always fun to highlight them.
Yep.
But I was going to say Tom is available is on Twitter as well, on our first last nerdum repper out there on Twitter, at McAllister_T, and then I am Sofa King Jewish with an H after the sofa. Anyway, but maybe you'll catch us there or on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll maybe slowly start to expand to other platforms too, and see if there's if we catch some fire there. But we're always happy to highlight. Thank you so much if you're a subscriber in the last several months. We thank you so much. We're up to 52, and we'd love to keep building and growing and seeing how it goes. So with that, I've been Mike.
I'm Thomas. Try not to get cursed by evil bishop out there.
Yeah, stay away from the evil bishop.
Yep.